On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected.
Thank you to all our amazing channel members for your generous support.
LaMotta, the legendary American boxer nicknamed the Raging Bull, died on September 19, 2017, at the age of 95 from complications related to pneumonia. His passing, natural in its medical cause, was in many ways emblematic of a life marked by endurance, resilience, and survival. Unlike so many fighters who died young or destitute, LaMotta's longevity stood as a testament to both his physical toughness and his ability to adapt beyond the ring. LaMotta's life story reflected the values and struggles of mid-20th century America. A Bronx-born son of Italian immigrants, he embodied the gritty determination of working-class fighters who saw boxing as a path out of poverty. In the 1940s and 1950s, his aggressive style, iron chin, and refusal to back down earned him fame and a middleweight championship. Yet his career was also entangled with the darker realities of his era: organized crime's influence in boxing, personal violence, and the cost of unrelenting ambition. His passing in 2017 evoked memories of a time when boxing was not only a sport, but a cultural battleground for identity, masculinity, and survival. The immediate consequence of his death was a renewed reflection on his complex legacy. Many remembered him not just for his fights, such as his legendary bouts with Sugar Ray Robinson, but for the unflinching portrait of his life in Martin Scorsese's Raging Bull, 1980. That film, based on LaMotta's own autobiography, immortalized him as both a fierce competitor and a deeply flawed man, ensuring that his story would remain part of American cultural history. His death amplified this legend, reinforcing his place as one of boxing's most memorable and controversial figures. LaMotta's passing also highlighted a broader cultural shift. By 2017, boxing's golden age had largely faded, replaced in popular consciousness by mixed martial arts and other entertainment forms. Remembering LaMotta was thus also an act of remembering the sport's central role in 20th century American identity. In reflecting on his death, we see how humanity confronts mortality not only by mourning individuals, but by preserving their stories in art, literature, and film. LaMotta is immortalized not through statues or official honors, but through Raging Bull, a cinematic masterpiece that captured his triumphs and his demons. His life and death remind us that memory is shaped not only by greatness, but also by honesty in portraying human flaws. Elizabeth Allen, the American actress known for her elegant presence on stage, film, and television, died on September 19, 2006, at the age of 77 from kidney failure. Her passing, natural in cause, reflected the realities of aging in an era when many of her contemporaries were also leaving the spotlight. Unlike the tragic, sudden deaths often associated with Hollywood figures, Allen's death came after a long and full career, symbolizing a quieter transition from the glamour of mid-20th century entertainment into memory. Allen rose to prominence during the 1950s and 1960s, an era when television was reshaping American culture. She appeared in popular series such as The Twilight Zone and Perry Mason, while also making her mark on Broadway in productions like Do I Hear a Waltz? Her film roles, including Donovan's Reef, 1963, opposite John Wayne, showcased her versatility and ability to embody both sophistication and warmth. By the time of her death, she had become part of the cultural fabric of an era when television and film began to dominate everyday life, reflecting the values of aspiration, glamour, and shifting gender roles. The immediate consequence of her passing was limited to tributes within theatrical and entertainment circles, rather than widespread public mourning. Yet this response highlights a broader truth. Many performers who shaped the cultural imagination of their time do not remain household names, even though their influence lingers. Allen's death amplified her legacy in a subtler way, reminding audiences of the countless supporting figures who contributed to television and theater's golden age without necessarily achieving enduring stardom. Her passing also underscores how memory and fame intersect. Unlike cultural icons whose deaths shift history, Allen's departure instead deepened appreciation among theater historians and fans for the breadth of mid-century entertainment. In that sense, her legacy reveals the fragility of fame, but also the resilience of art. Every rewatch of her Twilight Zone episodes or revival of her stage work ensures she is not forgotten. Allen's death invites reflection on how humanity immortalizes figures whose fame may not dominate headlines, but whose contributions enrich cultural heritage. Through archives, recordings, and retrospectives, artists like Allen live on, even if their names fade from common conversation. Her passing reminds us that cultural memory is not only about icons, but also about the many artists whose craft helped shape collective imagination. Jackie Collins, the British-born novelist whose glamorous, scandal-filled books captivated millions, died on September 19, 2015, at the age of 77 after a 6-year private battle with breast cancer. Her death, natural in cause yet devastating in its timing, reflected both the vulnerability of even the most successful figures and the ways in which women of her generation often confronted illness with quiet resilience. That Collins chose to keep her diagnosis hidden until shortly before her death mirrored her fiercely independent spirit, as well as the cultural tendency of celebrities to preserve public strength while grappling with private struggles. Collins rose to fame in the 1960s and 1970s, but it was the 1980s and 1990s that cemented her status as a literary phenomenon. Works like Hollywood Wives and Lucky captured the excesses of fame, wealth, and power, blending social critique with entertainment. At a time when women writers were often dismissed in genres outside serious literature, Collins unapologetically built a career on commercial success, selling over 500 million books worldwide. Her death marked the end of an era when mass-market fiction served as both escapism and a mirror of society's shifting values about gender, ambition, and sexuality. The immediate consequence of her passing was an outpouring of tributes from readers and the entertainment industry alike. Many saw her not only as a novelist, but as a trailblazer who gave voice to female characters who wielded power unapologetically. In the wake of her death, sales of her books surged, reflecting how mortality can amplify cultural memory by reigniting public interest in an artist's body of work. Collins's passing also raised broader questions about cultural legacy. While critics often debated the literary merit of her novels, there was little doubt about their influence. She expanded the space for women in popular fiction and reshaped public appetite for stories of glamour and scandal. Her death, therefore, not only amplified her legend, but also underscored how popular art can hold as much cultural weight as serious works. Reflecting on her death, we see humanity's enduring desire to immortalize figures who shaped imagination. Collins is remembered through her novels, adaptations, and tributes, but also through the countless writers she inspired. Her passing reveals that memory and power are not only preserved through monuments, but through the lasting resonance of storytelling. In this way, Jackie Collins remains alive in the escapism and empowerment her work continues to provide. Orville Redenbacher, the man whose name became synonymous with popcorn, died on September 19, 1995, at the age of 88. His death was accidental. He suffered a heart attack while in his jacuzzi, which caused him to drown. This sudden and unexpected end contrasted with the wholesome, genial image he cultivated throughout his career. In many ways, the circumstances of his death reflected a universal truth of his era. Even icons of comfort and familiarity were not immune to the unpredictability of life. Redenbacher's legacy was built not on entertainment or politics, but on food innovation. A trained agricultural scientist, he spent decades perfecting a hybrid popcorn that would pop fluffier and taste lighter than others on the market. When he launched his eponymous brand in the 1970s, he also became its face, an older man with bow tie and glasses, embodying warmth and authenticity. His image reflected the era's growing trust in personalities who bridged business and consumer culture. Unlike faceless corporations, Redenbacher gave his product a human anchor, one that emphasized both science and tradition. The immediate consequence of his passing was a flood of tributes that emphasized his role as both inventor and cultural figure. His death was widely covered by the media, and consumers mourned the loss of not just a businessman, but a beloved household presence. Sales of his products remained strong, and the company, by continuing to use his name and image, ensured his brand lived on even after his death. In this way, his passing amplified his legend. He became not just a man, but a symbol of quality and Americana. Redenbacher's story highlights the values of his era: the fusion of innovation with marketing, the power of personal branding, and the rise of food products as cultural icons. His accidental death underscored the fragility of life, while his continued presence on packaging and in commercials revealed how modern society immortalizes figures through branding as much as through traditional memorials. Ultimately, Orville Redenbacher's life and death remind us that cultural memory often transcends the individual, embedding them in the routines of everyday life. By associating his name with a simple joy like popcorn, Redenbacher achieved a form of immortality, ensuring that even decades after his passing, his image remains part of family traditions, movie nights, and the shared comfort of food. James A. Garfield, the 20th President of the United States, met a tragic and violent end that reflected both the instability of his era and the fragility of power in the late 19th century. On July 2, 1881, only a few months into his presidency, Garfield was shot by Charles J. Guiteau, a disgruntled office seeker who believed he was owed a government appointment. Though Garfield initially survived the attack, inadequate medical practices of the time ultimately sealed his fate. Doctors repeatedly probed his wound with unsterilized hands and instruments, introducing infections that modern medicine could have easily prevented. After suffering for 79 days, Garfield died on September 19, 1881, at just 49 years old. The nature of his death highlighted the medical limitations of the era. The germ theory of disease was still relatively new, and antiseptic techniques had not yet been widely embraced in the United States. Garfield's suffering became a grim symbol of how advancements in science often lagged behind cultural acceptance, and how this gap could shape history. His death was less a reflection of the bullet than of medicine's inability to meet the challenges of a rapidly modernizing society. The immediate consequences of Garfield's assassination were profound. His passing thrust Vice President Chester A. Arthur into the presidency, a man initially viewed with suspicion due to his ties to political patronage. Yet Garfield's death unexpectedly inspired reform. The national grief and outrage over the assassination created momentum for the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act of 1883, which began dismantling the corrupt spoils system. Thus, Garfield's violent death directly influenced the trajectory of American governance, making him a martyr for honest administration. Garfield's legacy was amplified by the tragedy of his short presidency. Though he had little time to enact policy, his death elevated him into a figure of national mourning and moral significance. Statues, memorials, and literature preserved his memory, casting him as a symbol of integrity cut down by corruption and madness. His story reveals humanity's complex relationship with mortality and power. We immortalize leaders not only for what they accomplished, but for what their deaths symbolize. In Garfield's case, his passing served as both a cautionary tale about violence in medicine and as a turning point in reforming the very system that contributed to his demise. Through commemoration and historical reflection, Garfield remains a reminder of how even tragedy can spark progress. John Challis, the beloved English actor, best known for his role as Boycie in the classic sitcom Only Fools and Horses, passed away on September 19, 2021, at the age of 79. His death was the result of a long battle with cancer, a natural end that reflected the quiet dignity with which he carried himself both on and off the screen. Unlike the sudden or violent deaths that often shock the public, Challis's passing resonated as a more reflective moment, one that underscored the inevitability of mortality and the fragility of the cultural figures who bring joy to everyday life. Challis's death occurred in an era when comedy and television remained central to cultural identity, particularly in Britain. His portrayal of Boycie, a wheeler-dealer with a distinctive laugh and pompous charm, made him an icon of working-class humor and social satire. His death highlighted the generational shift in entertainment, reminding audiences that the golden age of British sitcoms was receding further into the past. In a time dominated by streaming services and globalized entertainment, his passing served as a nostalgic reminder of a shared cultural experience that television once unified. The immediate consequences of his death were marked by widespread tributes from fans, colleagues, and cultural institutions. Cast members from Only Fools and Horses and The Green Grass remembered him not just as a gifted actor, but as a warm and generous man. His death also sparked renewed interest in the shows he helped make famous, amplifying his legacy by drawing younger viewers into the orbit of Britain's comedic heritage. Challis's legacy was indeed amplified by his passing. While he had enjoyed a steady career, it was his death that reignited appreciation for the artistry of character actors, those who may never headline Hollywood films, but whose performances shape cultural memory in enduring ways. In his case, the character of Boycie remains immortal, replayed endlessly through reruns, DVDs, and digital archives, ensuring that his laughter continues to echo long after his life ended. Challis's story reflects humanity's deep need to preserve memory through art and performance. We immortalize figures like him not in statues or monuments, but through laughter, nostalgia, and storytelling. His death reminds us that even when the body fails, the characters and emotions artists give us endure, binding generations together through shared joy. Gloria Talbot, the American actress who rose to fame during the 1950s and 1960s, passed away on September 19, 2000, at the age of 69. Her death was caused by kidney failure, a natural end that contrasted sharply with the dramatic and often perilous roles she portrayed on screen. Known as a staple of mid-century Hollywood, Talbot appeared in a range of productions, from westerns to melodramas and science fiction films like I Married a Monster from Outer Space. Her passing reflected the broader reality faced by many actors of her generation. Fleeting stardom in an industry that constantly reinvented itself, leaving behind both unforgettable screen legacies and quieter personal struggles. The era of Talbot's career was one in which Hollywood was expanding into new genres to captivate post-war audiences. The Cold War years gave rise to science fiction and horror films that reflected cultural anxieties about invasion, technology, and the unknown. Talbot often embodied the vulnerable heroine navigating these fears, making her an emblem of the era's cinematic imagination. Her death decades later served as a reminder of how those films, once considered pulp entertainment, had become touchstones of cultural history. The immediate response to Talbot's death was more subdued compared to the passing of headline stars. Yet, within fan communities and classic film circles, it carried weight. Enthusiasts of 1950s cinema paid tribute to her as one of the genre's memorable faces, recognizing that her performances helped define a generation of films that still enjoy cult followings. In this way, her death amplified her legacy, prompting a reappraisal of her contributions at a time when nostalgia for mid-century culture was resurgent. Talbot's passing illustrates how even figures who were not the era's brightest stars remained vital threads in the tapestry of cultural memory. While she may not have shifted the trajectory of history, her presence in films that encapsulated Cold War anxieties ensures her place in Hollywood's broader story. She stands as a reminder that cinematic immortality is not reserved solely for marquee names, but also for those whose work captured the spirit of their time. Ultimately, Talbot's death underscores humanity's impulse to preserve memory through art and performance. Her films, replayed and rediscovered, serve as living monuments, keeping her image alive. In remembering her, we see how mortality does not erase influence. Instead, it invites us to revisit the worlds artists built and to honor the lasting resonance of their craft.